course.
And so the township would ultimately need to be the permittee before the DEP if that were to happen, is that correct?
Yes, if they were to own and operate, they would be the permittee.
And how many townships, for projects that you've worked on, have accepted for dedication wastewater treatment plants?
The vast majority.
And they operate these wastewater treatment plants?
Yes, they're all offered for dedication to them. There are a few that are offered by third-party PUC, and the only ones that are privately owned and operated are commercial entities where where one property owner owns the entire property. But all the other ones have been ultimately owned and operated by the township.
Of the three processes that you discussed in your report, I think you said that the sequential batch reactor was the preferred process. Is that
That's correct.
And how many have you designed and permitted in Pennsylvania of that type of system?
Country Crossing Wastewater Treatment Plant in Warwick Township, Bucks County.
Yes, how many?
More than a dozen.
And what is the level or number of units that you had permitted as far as those systems goes? Is it more or less than the units that are proposed?
Honestly, both. Starting from 10,000 gallons per, 6,000 gallons per day, going up to numerous ones at 100,000, numerous ones in the 300,000 range, going up to 1.2 million gallons per day.
So this is in the middle of the range or the high end of that range?
And this is exactly the reason that I selected the sequential batch reactor process. If the flows were significantly lower, like 10,000 gallons, I would have gone with the flow-through modified Bardentho process. Or if it would be in excess of 2 million gallons, I would have gone with a flow-through process with primary clarifiers and things like that. Every situation is unique, but in my opinion, between 60,000 gallons and 400,000 gallons, sequential batch reactor process is probably, it's the most popular for a reason. It's the best application. It's the most efficient from an energy standpoint, from a sludge standpoint, and most importantly, it produces the best quality effluent.
And the other options, the modified Bardentho process and the BEST process, are those typically used in Pennsylvania?
Oh, yes.
So all throughout the Northeast?
Oh, yes. I can only speak for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Delaware, but and Maryland, and all three of them are commonly utilized in those three states. As, go ahead.
Sorry, you've been involved in getting those systems permitted through the DEP?
Yes, I have permitted, I have designed and permitted each one of those three systems. That's why I felt qualified to make that recommendation.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said that this system would handle 89, or at least the areas that are designated on the plan to be drip irrigation areas would handle up to 89,000 gallons?
That would be the least conservative. On the treatment process, the design of the treatment plant is 317 residential units, 2 community centers, each being assigned 3 EDUs each, for a total of 323 EDUs, multiplied by the township's EDU is an equivalent dwelling, multiplied by the township's defined flow per EDU of 250 gallons per day per EDU equals 80,750 gallons. What I then testified on the drip disposal was that the disposal fields, using the worst, not the worst, but moderately well-drained soils, which was the lower of the 2 drainage classifications, would result in 89,000 and change gallons per day disposal capacity.
And so is that a safety factor that DEP usually factors in?
No, what it is the actual soils that were identified by the soil scientists were in excess. As we go through, we actually design the disposal fields so that it matches the treatment capacity.
Well, no, so my question is there a safety design factor that DEP requires?
No, there's not. The safety factor is designed into the flow per EDU, and the fact that the residential units will produce less than 250 gallons per day going there, but DEP does not require 10% factor of safety or any factor of safety. The factor of safety is all borne out through the science, and you have your disposal capacity has to equal your treatment capacity. There is nothing that will prevent you from not designing and permitting and constructing excess, but there is no regulatory requirement that I'm aware of.
Do these systems wear out over time?
They're constant. That's why we have ownership and maintenance by municipal or third-party PUC. As components wear out, they are replaced.
Well, how about the drip irrigation areas? I mean, do they eventually stop working?
Well, no. And that's the reason that we rely upon a biological treatment system, so that the treatment, mechanical treatment plant does all the treatment and does not rely on the soils to do any treatment. So we try to put the cleanest effluent possible. So the only thing the soils have to do is absorb it. And the reason we picked the best drainage classifications is rain has fallen on that ground for 200 years. And it's still permeable and still properly drained. The reason that individual on-lot systems fail is that they're relying on the soils to do the treatment, as well as the disposal. And that treatment creates different biology, which inhibits the permeability of the soils. Here, we're trying to mimic Mother Nature, and we're trying to put effluent on there that as closely as possible matches rainwater. So we want to do this and have it just do as it's naturally done, absorb the rainwater, absorb the treated effluent, and go down. And that's why we chose drip irrigation, because it uniformly distributes it across the entire field. And we do what's known as a mounding analysis, so that it does not raise the naturally occurring groundwater table to within 4 feet of the emitters. That's our requirement to meet.
So are there certain parameters that you have to meet under DEP standards for, let's say, effluent pollutants? I mean, you indicated that nitrogen was one of the things that was going to be put into the ground and I guess grown as grass, so to speak.
Well,
are there levels of
yes,
pollutant parameters?
Yes, there are. The parameters are identified by the PADEP in the Water Quality Management Permit, which is the permit that the DEP issues to the owner and operator, which defines the level of treatment that is required by the mechanical treatment plant prior to it being discharged to the drip disposal fields.
So there is some level, it's not entirely clean, the effluent?
Oh, no, absolutely not. There always will be a level of nitrogen in there, which is, we're designing for less than 10. I actually conservatively designed for 15, designed a treatment plant for less than 10 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen, but I do my basis of design of my disposal fields based on 15 milligrams per liter, which I guess would be your factor of safety. We also, in order to reach those levels of denitrification, you have to reduce the biological oxygen demand to less than 10 milligrams per liter. All 3 treatment systems that I've suggested will also reduce the total suspended solids down to less than 10 milligrams per liter. Our goal is to make the soils work, to utilize the soils at least amount as possible in the treatment of the wastewater and disposal.
Soils are utilized.
Soils will naturally treat wastewater, any contaminant that comes into it. Mother Nature does a great job, and those microbes that are in there will gobble up any carbon source or any nitrogen that you have, the same way fertilizing a lawn. The grass and the crop is gorgeous because it's equivalent of irrigating and fertilization. Basically, what we're doing here is exactly what a golf course does.
So you mentioned nitrogen as a pollutant that would be in that word. What are the other parameters that DEP tests for?
Normally, it's just biological oxygen demand and total suspended solids coming out of the treatment plant. There is also additional, there'll be monitoring wells located both up gradient and down gradient of every disposal fields. They are tested quarterly. There is a series of parameters that they test. I don't remember them all off the top of my head. Nitrogen is the largest one that we're normally concerned about, but they even include temperature, everything, pH, making sure that we're not changing the characteristics of the groundwater table. And then what is required is not only do we sample them quarterly, there's a requirement to do an annual report every year, and at the end of 5 years, there's a significantly more involved water quality report that's done to the PADEP. It's reviewed by their staff, hydrogeologist, as well as the soil scientists.
What happens if the testing of those wells determines that there's excess nitrogen in the water?
The level of treatment will be required to be increased such that the total level of nitrogen leaving the property will be less than 10 milligrams per liter.
Now, how does the system, I guess, either of the three options, how do those systems handle pharmaceuticals or chemical compounds that are flushed down the toilet or down the sink?
It's a biological system. It breaks it down biologically the same way our bodies do. When we take pharmaceuticals in, it goes in, the microorganisms that are in our stomach that break that down, that allow it to be utilized by our body, are the same microorganisms that are flushed down the toilet and become the biomass at the treatment plant. The advantage there is that there is a highly concentrated amount of biomass that comes in and can take all those pharmaceuticals and biologically degrade them the same as our bodies do. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Peter Dufault or anyone in Thornbury, any questions?
No questions.
All right, bear with me, ladies and gentlemen, as a number of people came in late, so I'm going to run through my list again a second time to confirm who's here and who isn't here as quickly as possible. Anyone here for Radley Run 3 HOA? Anyone here for Arborview HOA?
Yes. William Hoffman.
Mr. Hoffman, do you have any questions?
I mean,
Mr. Bevilacqua, do you have any questions for West Glen HOA or the school district? Mr. McFalls, any questions for the church? Mr. Ferrio, any questions for the swimming association?
No, we do not.
Mr. Spackman, any questions for the Thornbury Farm Trust?
I guess that was a question.
If you would mind coming to the microphone.
Hello, you just have to forgive me, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm also opening my voice.
Mr. Spackman, if you can get right up, real close to the microphone, I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm getting over a cold too, so it's not helping the situation at all either. So I have a small background in soils from farming myself. One of the questions I had is, you said that you had have a 3-day holding capacity for the effluents in case of a power failure or mechanical failure. How many gallons is that for a 3-day holding capacity?
Approximately 242,350 gallons per day. It would be 80,750 gallons times 3, so it would be actually 242,250 gallons.
How is something like that conveyed, or how is that held? Is it above ground, below ground structure, or what is that? That's a fairly sizable.
It can be either. I normally recommend a precast post-tension underground tank. The reason is that I want to keep it underground where the temperature of the wastewater of the treated effluent is maintained at approximately 50 to 60 degrees, same as a geothermal. I don't want to chill that wastewater for it to occur during the winter, where I would have the chance of putting 35-degree effluent out into a disposal field. So my preference is to keep it at grade and under, so that I retain as much heat as possible. Heat's also retained by the selection of precast post-tension tanks. Concrete is a very good insulator, surrounded by soil. So that's my preference, but honestly, I have millions of gallons located above grade in Upper Euclid Township. We have above grade precast post-tension tanks. I've done it with steel tanks above grade and have never had a problem. You know, the goal is that you're never utilizing that, but it's a mechanical system.
Right.
Things are going to break. Lightning strikes, electrical issues happen. You have to be prepared for it.
And one of my other questions is, with a system of this size, it sounds very impressive. Where would the infrastructure be located on the site? Would it be a gravity system? So if there's a power failure from the homes, how would that effluence get to your
What would
treatment
normally
pumping
happen
centers?
is the majority of the site, and I did not do a collection system, but I'm generally familiar with
Right.
the site, would follow the concourse of streams down to the bottom. At that point, there would be a pump station, which would have an emergency generator. Emergency generator would be sized for 24 hours of continuous run with a diesel tank, which would then pump it to the treatment site. There are various areas across the site that we can locate the treatment plant. Treatment plant is recommended, but not required, to be located a minimum of 250 feet away from any occupied dwelling unit, So we have analyzed the site and come up with various locations across the site where we could locate the treatment plant. From there, it would be pumped. The treatment plant would also have an emergency generator on it, which would provide power to that, and that would be able to dose all the disposal fields out in the system.
Are you using chlorine as a dosing for the
Sorry, sir,
sanitation?
are you using that?
I'm sorry, are you using chlorine as a dosing for the sanitation for the end product as it goes out to the
As
final
far as
stream?
disinfection, no, I'm
Yes.
not. We're using ultraviolet disinfection, which is ultraviolet light,
Sterile.
which kills it. It's a biological system in grass, so I don't want to increase, even though you could use a dechlorination agent. I want to minimize the amount of chemicals that are on that are on the site and ultimately being conveyed to the groundwater table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spackman. Bradley or Amy Harkins, do you have any questions? My Macari's here, do you have any questions? Mr. Gadaletto, are you here, do you have any questions?
I'm here, I don't have any questions.
Philip Jones, are you present? Mr. Misharis, are you present? Allison Corcoran, are you present? Benjamin Scupp, are you present at this time? Diana Lararis, are you here this evening? Ed Boyer, are you present? Have any questions?
I have no questions.
Amy Murname, are you present and have any questions? Kurt Walter, are you present this evening? Mr. Crognali, are you have any questions? Are you present this evening? Robert Dahl, are you here this evening?
I am, I have one quick question.
Hi, it's Bob Dahl, D-A-U-L-L, 1163 Lake Drive, Westtown Township. Yeah, we live in very close proximity to Crebilly Farm. It's a small two-street development, Lake Drive and Serpentine Drive. We're all on wells and septic systems. And I asked this question at the last meeting, but I'd like to get a second opinion. We also have underground streams running from Crebilly Farm. We're downhill from Crebilly. And we have underground streams running from Crebilly into our area. Do you take into consideration nearby developments that are on septics and on wells, and whether or not the system that you're suggesting for Crebilly could have an adverse effect if something did go wrong?
Yes, we absolutely do. The first thing is that's the reason that we have monitoring wells surrounding our drip fields. So that's an early warning if for some reason the nitrogen levels are required to be less than 10 milligrams per liter, which is the safe drinking limit. So we have an obligation to maintain it less than that at the property line. So we have a network of monitoring wells located adjacent, downstream, down gradient of each disposal field that we monitor quarterly. So we will look for, and an engineer is required to evaluate that at the end of the year. What we're looking for are trends where the background nitrogen level here is the maximum 6.4 milligrams per liter. We're looking for trends that over time it's creeping from 6 to 7 to 8. At that point, we can proactively look at the treatment system, see what's going on, or redistribute the amount of effluent that's going somewhere. Maybe there is an issue with the control logic, that this field's being dosed twice as much as another one. Someone entered the wrong data. We know that. So that's the stopgaps that the DEP puts in place. And that is then monitored by a professional engineer on an annual basis. And that report is then reviewed by a professional hydrogeologist at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So the township engineer or third-party PUC engineer or whatever consulting engineer they use can't fake the numbers and can't not identify it because it's double checked. So DEP has placed that checks and balances in place there, there. So we know anything that's going to happen. We have various checks and balances in place before it would leave our property to the point where it can impact the private residents.
So the probability of something adversely affecting our wells is
Very, very low. I'm not aware of it happening in a recently designed, recently 1990 plus, system, the on-site disposal system. And that's the reason that we are not relying on the soils and the groundwater to do the work of the treatment. We're doing it mechanically, and we're testing it on a weekly basis at the treatment plant, so that we know what we're putting in the soil. The soil then, as another person had said, the soil's going to still do treatment.
Right.
No matter what you put in there, rainwater, it's going to treat. So we've done all those parameters, and I'm not aware of any that have had issues or been put under a consent order, to my knowledge. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm not aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Scott Sobers, are you present this evening? Mr. Pavlicek, are you here this evening? Philip Yeager, are you present? Joe Cahill, are you here tonight? David Price, do you have any questions?
I do. Most of what we talked about has been all about drip irrigation, and I've heard a couple of the effluent going into several different tanks. But I can't see the plans from back there. So therefore, I'm going to ask this question. Is there going to be any retention ponds at all with any aeration? We know that aeration cleans black water, but I just want to make sure that that's going to be the case. Because at that point, then we worry about the stench, and then also what that's going to do to bring the geese more into the neighborhood.
There are no proposed storage lagoons, aerated storage lagoons. All the mechanical treatment plant is a